And welcome to the Midday Show. I am Jeff Everett. He is Mark Messina. The best conversation was before the show. Maybe we'll talk about it later this week. But today we are going to talk about ranking Pennsylvania colleges. U.S. News released their list. Virginia has a very unique book ban going on right now. And then football overreactions. Obviously, a lot happened over the weekend, high school, college, NFL level. So we're going to talk about that. And then maybe do a little thinking out loud at the end of the show. Before we get to all of those things, Mark, how are you feeling today?
Mark is going to be tired at some point because I spent a couple hours in the middle of the night when I should have been sleeping staring at my phone because I couldn't sleep. I do want to mention this before we get too far in.
Yeah.
Albert Pujols hit his 697th home run in Pittsburgh yesterday. The husband and wife, if you didn't see the story, a husband and wife caught the home run ball. And it was the 1 year anniversary of the death of the wife's father. It was 1 year to the day. And they are in Pirates gear. Like, they are not Cardinals fans. They are Pirates fans. So they here, we'll give Mr. Pujols his home run because it's 690. He's fourth all time. And it wasn't a record setter, the last one, but he's still fourth all time. And he said, no, you can keep it. It means more to you than it will to me. Like, you keep the home run. So, because you always get these, like, they try to exchange and the players want the stuff back, and these people offered to give it back. And he said, no, you keep it, and he signed other baseballs for him. So it was a cute little feel-good story. And also in Philadelphia, because you get late in the year and they don't want to have rainouts because they want to get the games in at all costs. And sometimes on weekends they will wait. They set a record yesterday, 3 hour and 36-minute rain delay in Philadelphia because they had to get the game in because the Phillies may or may not make the playoffs. So they just put the football game up on the big screen. And the diehard Phillies fans that sat there just watched the Eagles game while they waited for the rain to stop. So I thought that was a little cute stuff from the baseball world this weekend. And there you go. Now we can go. Let's go.
No, that was good. Ranking PA colleges, first, you want to, just right from the get-go, do you want to guess where Susquehanna fell? Where did Susquehanna fall?
I mean, we're obvious. Usually when they do, to be honest, when they usually do these rankings, we're exempt because we're like, No,
I don't know.
Who else is, it's like ranking, the greatest basketball players of all time. Okay, Jordan's one. Now let's talk about everybody else. So that's kind of how we do it. So go ahead.
That's pretty good. The basis for this, the U.S. News, every year they release their best college rankings. A little bit of debate this year. A couple of people kind of calling them out. Apparently, universities send in their own data and statistics.
Of course, and apparently nobody else keeps it.
No. Well, what's beautiful about that, though, is there have been other professors and administrators from their own universities basically calling out their institutions that these numbers are just flat out lies. Like, they're not real. There's no way these numbers actually exist. But obviously, you want to be ranked at the top of this list, so they just say what they have to say. So there's a whole debate going on right now with a couple of the private Ivy League schools about giving falsified numbers to this report from actual people from their institution. However, with all of that said, it's broken up into two categories. Nationally, the highest ranked school in Pennsylvania was the University of Pennsylvania. They came in at 7th. Yeah, I could have guessed that too. Interesting spot for Pennsylvania, just given all of the drama that has surrounded them over the last year or so. And they made this list in the top 10 in the country. Carnegie Mellon, 22 out of Pittsburgh. Lehigh University was tied with Villanova. They were both 51st. University of Pittsburgh edged out Penn State University. Pittsburgh coming in at 62. Penn State coming in ranked 77th nationally. And then you start to hit some of the other schools: Drexel, Temple, Thomas Jefferson, Duquesne, Robert Morris, LaSalle, all between 100 and 200. The only state school, and I want to make sure I phrase this correctly, the only Pennsylvania State Athletic Conference school, right? Like the PSAC schools, because technically Penn State is like a state school.
Yeah, but I know what you mean though.
But they're their own. The only PSAC school to make the list was Westchester University.
That would have been my guess.
Okay, Westchester came in at 250, which is the last spot in the national ranking.
Huh. Good for them.
Yes. So here's my thing after going through all of this. I think, doesn't this list show a lot of what is wrong with how we think secondary education is supposed to work, but it actually doesn't? And
Well,
what
I've
I mean,
noticed this. Oh, go ahead.
I just, my 10-second dumbed down version, I guess, of what this list made me think was you have all these people that are saying secondary education is super important. It should be available to everybody, further your education, yada, yada, yada. But then when you look at this list, all those schools that you would believe make education affordable or that is government, like the state is basically funding it to be more affordable, none of those schools make the list. So isn't there kind of like a double-edged sword here of like saying secondary education, you have to do it, it's better, everybody should do it. But then when you look at this list, if you really don't have money or if you're not one of the brightest of the brightest, like you're not even going to one of the best 250 schools in the country.
Well, I don't know about that because I do know that there are these private schools. Was Bucknell not on the list?
Bucknell is in the liberal arts lists because they have their own,
Okay.
like, so for just not to cut you off, like Swarthmore, Haverford, Bryn Mawr, Bucknell, Franklin Marshall, Dickinson, they are all in like this little liberal arts competition off to the side. I shouldn't call it little, but they're in their own category.
But yeah, like a lot of the private schools give better aid than the public schools, even though their tuition is like 80 grand a year.
Right.
Their financial aid is really, really good. So, yeah, I mean, but I do understand that's part of it. But when you get back to the statistics and the BS that comes with the statistics, and when my two daughters, I've one that's a junior at Pitt and I have one that's a freshman at Vassar, and they're telling me, oh, the acceptance rate is 8%, and I said to her, how do you know that? And they're like, well, it says right here. And I was like, but just think about in the checks and balance system of the world, who knows who applied to Harvard? Harvard. So when Harvard tells you we got this many applicants and we accepted this many, how can you possibly double check their work? There's no way. It is totally on their honor. So I know when my daughter went to Vassar and we read something, she had told me what their acceptance rate was. Then when we were there talking to the university president on Accepted Students Day, the university president gave a much more realistic number than we read online. And then it was like, okay, that number seems more believable of the people that applied than the people that were accepted. So, and then you also don't know, is it how many people apply? Because you get a school like Vassar that, you should, if you Google it, The Simpsons did a joke. There's Vassar in a Simpsons episode because it's one of the fallbacks. So it's like the Bucknells of, there's lots of kids that are at Bucknell that apply to the Ivies that didn't get in. And it's like, that's why they call the Patriot League like the lower Ivy or whatever you want to call it. And so if a kid applies to these schools and they get in, but they got into a better school and they went to a different one, does that count as someone, is the school counting that as someone who didn't get in, or is it counting someone that didn't apply? So if you say we have 1,000 people in our freshman class and we had 10,000 applicants, does that mean we have a 10%? Well, maybe they accepted more, but others turned them down. So yes, it is just because there's no checks and balance. Only the school knows who applied. Only the school knows all this. Right. I remember when I was at Susquehanna and people were talking about our average SAT levels. And I'm like, I talked to these kids walking around campus. They weren't bringing home 1350s. Like, I know there were some of them that did. The people that I'm hanging out with are not. So it is, how are you going to know? It's not like Susquehanna can double check LICO's work. So it's a lot on the honor system, and they have a lot to gain by not necessarily always being honest.
Oh yeah, it's if you want to have a good laugh, like look up this ranking on Twitter and go into like the comments and see some of the professors and different people actually saying stuff about the numbers that were given. The liberal arts ranking, I just want to mention it because we did have a couple of local universities. In Pennsylvania, Swarthmore was 4th in the country. Bucknell University in Lewisburg, 37th in the country for liberal arts colleges. Lycoming College, 111th in the country for liberal arts colleges, in a tie with Susquehanna University, who also came in at 111.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Stop it already.
They're saying it's a tie between the old Riverhawks and the Warriors. That's what they're saying.
Wrong. They are wrong.
So interesting list. I mean, Pennsylvania, I believe, came in 2nd for the most schools on the list. Some of that is inflated.
We have a lot of schools.
We have a ton of schools, so that's part of it. But also, too, I do think Pennsylvania is viewed as like a secondary ed haven a little bit. You know,
I just wore this shirt coincidentally, by the way, too.
No, I said you had your Loyalsock maroon on when you first sat down.
You know, I went to the closet. I was like, what should I wear? I wanted to feel like the smartest person in the office today, so I wore this.
No, that's I see what you're saying. This will be my last pitch at you because it did it did bother me, and I want you to not talk me out of it, but I want you to tell me I'm looking for something that's not really there. Isn't there? I mean, again, 250 schools nationally. Pennsylvania had almost 20 schools in the top 250. The last one that barely got onto the list was the only public state institution. That doesn't that's not a red flag. That's not at the very least, does it not show that even in a system where we try to make school affordable for all, does it not still show that that people can still buy their way ahead of you, even if you are one of those people that has to go to a state education institution?
Yes.
No?
Yes. No, it does.
Yeah.
I think we are going to see. I think society's changing now that you pop in old movies. I was just watching a movie the other day, and I say old like from 15, 20 years ago, where they're like, I couldn't find a job. And you drive down the highway and every other billboard is about hiring. So, and we've seen, just changes in educational values as I think we just had open gym for basketball last night, and I was talking to kids about, make sure you keep your grades up because, now this matters, even with the junior high kids. And now this stuff matters. You need to be eligible. And the one kid was telling me his schedule. I was like, that can't really be your schedule, is it? And he looked at me and goes, yeah, why? I'm not going to college. And there was a time, even in my life, because the way we were brought up, that you have to go to college. If you're not going to the military, you have to go to college. And nowadays, we're in the world where we need more kids that don't go to traditional college, like the liberal. We need kids that are going to Penn College to get HVAC and plumbing and carpentry and things like that. And when this kid tells me that last night, there was a part of me that's good. We need kids like you. So I think, as Biden came through with his to cut the college loan program, whatever he did, we're going to see things more geared towards if you want to go to normal college, you're on your own. If you want to go to a trade school, we'll help you there because we need more, the traditional blue collar trades. I think over the next generation, we're going to see a big shift in education. And of course, we have a generation coming through right now that's figuring out with TikTok and YouTube and all this other stuff, how they can make money and don't need college. So,
sure.
I think we're going to see a big shift.
I expected the list to be tilted. I did not expect it to be just a complete wipeout of it. I mean, it was almost like just throwing the public schools a bone by throwing Westchester on at 250. It's just, I don't know, a little too tilted for my liking. Book ban, Virginia. You said that you had not seen this. I tried to give you the 15-second overview. For anybody that's not keeping up with it, to me, it's fascinating. Virginia parents are pushing for more authority over what kids can read in school libraries. The result that is coming out of this is that the Virginia delegate, Tim Anderson, has, quote, in school libraries across their Commonwealth, they're going to have books that are in libraries that are extremely sexual in nature. We have to give parents more authority over the schools and what their children have access to while they're in the schools. The result of this is they want to, the quote they keep using is put parents back in the driver's seat. Well, the result is they're going to use a rating system that is based off of the Motion Picture Association film rating system. So you will have books that are rated G, R, all the way up through 17. And essentially, if those books are rated too highly, they will not be allowed to be in public schools. I try to find topics all the time. My favorite ones to talk to you about are the ones where I am undecided on how I feel about it. The moment I read this, there were things where I was like, actually, that's ingenious. And there were things where I was kind of like, boy, this is a slippery slope. Who's deciding these ratings? Yada, yada, yada. So the Virginia book ban for me, I am on the fence. I am trying to see how I feel about it. And every time I reread it, I go back and forth.
And the reason that your favorite topics are the ones where you're undecided is then you can have me explain it to you.
Yes, that's what it is. Your expertise to lend me to the right side of things. The last thing I want to say to you before that you go on, he has said, quote, I'm concerned about this subset of parents who think they can legislate what children are reading and whose children get to read these materials. Overwhelmingly, the books that we see targeted are by authors of minority communities or by LGBTQ authors, and it is unfortunate that they continue to push their particular perspective onto other families. So there's two sides to this. One side of it is them trying to, parents want books banned that they just don't flat out want in the libraries. On the other side of this, though, I don't see why you wouldn't have a rating system across multimedia in general if we do it for movies. So I'm like torn between the idea of, I know they're trying to kind of ramrod this through because of other motives, but I also look at it and think to myself, like, well, we've been doing a movie, like we would never allow certain movies in schools because of a rating that's done by an outside organization. Applying it to books doesn't seem that absurd to me. So I'm kind of in this middle ground of trying to balance it out.
Well, but I think from that aspect, I don't think high school libraries, like, do they put the Harlequin romance and the smut, like I think there's always
sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think there's always been like common sense to what reading level these kids are at. Even like the high school library is different than the elementary school library. I don't think they're just like, oh, here's some books and just take them. So I assume that's kind of part of the job of the librarian. The topic, the part where it's, well, okay, here. First of all, kids mostly aren't reading stuff in the library. They're reading stuff on their phones. So
sure.
It is almost like, how old are you that you think you're keeping the information from the kids by keeping it out of the library?
Sure.
That's topic number one.
Very, very, very fair point.
Topic number two is the honest aspect of it is the suicide rates of these kids are of the LGBTQ community is higher than typical. And a lot of the issue, not all of the issue, but a lot of the issue is because they are not accepted at home. So when these things of like, we're like, put the parents back in charge, a lot of the problem is the parents. And they're like, hell no, my kid's not gay. And the kid who's afraid to come home and say they're gay. So then where does this person get that the kid already knows that he's an outcast, he or she is an outcast because dad won't have it or mom won't have it. So these are the kids who need the information at the school, in the school library, because they're not getting it at home. And I know in the lovey-dovey, like normal church going, wrap your arms around everyone family, like we want the parents and the kids on the same page. There are a lot of kids who need to be on a different page of their parents because their parents are racist or bigoted or whatever the case may be. And the only place they can get that information is at school. And if we tell the kids, nope, you're only allowed to read what your parents tell you can read, then they are just perpetuating the racism and the bigotry. And this is why, like, we think like the LGBTQ. Now, let me say, I shouldn't say that. If you assume that the high suicide rate and mental illness, depression, and all these things that go with the LGBTQ, if you think it's only from peers, you're crazy. A lot of it, some of it is from peers, some of it is from home. So to say like parents are the best thing for their own kids is not true all the time, especially in the LGBTQ community.
I agree with your point about the phones. I would even take it one step further. And I would say if like when I was a teenager and if I had any questions or issues or there were things about the world that I wasn't sure of, maybe I'm unique. The public library was not the place I was going to seek out these answers. And I'm not putting anybody down who that was the world they lived in or that's what they did. But so to me, some of these issues that are being up, like sexual orientation, all these different parts of it, I don't understand why books is like the forefront or like the standing ground for either side of this debate. I can't wrap my head around the idea that public books are the thing that both of these sides. I guess maybe it's just like it's just trying to get one over on the other side. I'm not implying that people aren't petty enough to do that. But I agree with you. Like, I'm not really sure why the public library has become like the hill that this is being fought over. How many books is this affecting? Like, that's the other part that I keep going back to. And you kind of hinted at this. Given the age levels of the schools and the books that are typically in, I mean, are we talking like 1% of the books on a typical public school library shelf, 5%, 10%? I would love to see numbers of books that have been like attempted to be banned or were banned at one point. I would love to see the percentages on those numbers because I can't imagine it's double digits. Like I can't imagine a public school library, it's 10% or more of books that are like, I just don't get it. All of that aside, because I think you brought up a lot of good points and I thought I did as well. All of that aside, I kind of don't hate the rating system. I do wonder why, in a world where it was so important that movies had ratings and people didn't see X or people didn't see Y, but then in a world where now you have all these other multimedias, right? Like, and it keeps growing with social media and all stuff. It is ironic to me that like it was so important for this one form of media, but for all the other medias, rating them seems like this absurd thing. And I don't know if that's crazy. If you actually got a group of people together that decided to rate these books that didn't have a secondary agenda, like they were truly just readers and they were educators and they were people that sincerely just wanted to rate books the same way they do movies, I'm kind of for it.
I think movies are simpler because you can count how much use of profanity, and you can
wouldn't books be easier? It's right there.
But you can count how many seconds of nudity and how many instances, like, because it's I don't know. This is and as a parent who I think I've been a successful parent, and I'm a very laissez-faire, I guess, as you would say, on a lot of it. I never check my kids' phones because I think you're just chasing your tail and you can never catch it. So sure. As I don't know of any kid. I know the first time my son watched White Men Can't Jump, I think he was 12, and I watched it with him because it's funny. And I know I've shown my daughter it's Jim Jeffers, right? Is the comedian? Or is it Jim Jeffries?
Yep.
Is it Jeffries?
Yep.
I know I've shown her bits of his stuff and said, just get past the language and get to the point.
Sure.
When she was young. And I've never met a kid whose life went downhill because he watched Porky's when he was 13.
So can I give you this example then? Because I'm glad you brought this analogy up, because I think it is perfect, and I don't say that very often about your analogies. Like,
and when you say very often, you can replace that with never.
Never. Part of what I like about your analogy is there is a movie rating system, and even if you may disagree with it or you don't have your kids abide by it, instead of taking your 12-year-old, 14-year-old, 17-year-old to the theater, you're like, hey, we're going to watch this movie. I think it's funny. Here's the parts, like whatever. And you'll watch whatever it is, right? In the comfort of your own, in your own home, with your permission, under your supervision. Whenever we apply that to other multimedia, people can't wrap their head around it. And I don't understand that, because to me, I'm not saying the motive of the reason the people want to get rid of these books is, like I said, we're setting that aside, because I know they have a separate agenda and a separate motive. But what I'm saying is, like, the same way you work movies with your kids, I don't see why doing it with books is so absurd. This idea of, if you're going to get this book, you need to be this old, or you need to have a parent come and sign it out for you and read it at your own house. It's the same concept as movies, and no one really gripes about movies. No one makes a big deal about the fact that a movie's rated R and they watched it when they were 13, but their parents gave them permission at their own house. Like, I don't know. Like, to me, it just seems very similar, but for whatever reason, we can't wrap our heads around it.
I think this is a very good topic you found. Well done, Jeff. For the parts of the library that's, here, I'll start it this way. Once a kid gets one of these, whoops, and I just got a message. Oh,
that is the library.
3 children died after being found unconscious on a Brooklyn shore. Their mother's being questioned. No wonder she's being questioned. Their 3 children died. But once you get one of these,
that is the library.
It's over. Like,
that's the library. You just held it up in your hand.
Yes, but not only, you can't censor this as a parent.
It's impossible.
And even because we had a bunch of kids over watching MMA the other night, as I've said this before, it's not just you can check your kid's phone. But all night, if you're ever around a group of kids, they're like, hey, look at this. Hey, look at this. This is what and so you can't check everyone's phone. So now it's just a point of teaching your kid moral values, teaching your kid the ability to judge right and wrong. And because that's all you can do. And in every situation they have in life, they have their moral compass and they have their ability to judge right and wrong, and they can go from there. The issue in the libraries comes down to the elementary school, and it was the big issue that they had at the James V. Brown Library in Williamsport, because it was in the children's section, the kids that are at ages before they have these. Sure. And that's where it can be vitally important. There's always that section of people that, like, in a children's book, there needs to be mom and dad. In a children's book, there can't be 2 moms, or there can't be 2 dads. Because there's this section of society that feels like these books are trying to recruit. When and I can't speak for all of them, because I just don't think they're trying to recruit. What I think they're trying to do is explain to these kids who grow up with 2 moms, or who grow up with 2 dads, or who don't who know that they're different, and maybe they're even young enough to not know. And I'm not a psychologist, but to be able to point out that not every family in life is a mom and dad and a son and a daughter and a white picket fence and a dog. That there are different, and people are different, and kids are different, and families are different, and it's okay. And so that's what they're trying to teach at these young levels. And there's some families that are really afraid of it.
So let me flip it on you, and let me ask you this. Would you, if they decided to get rid of the movie rating system, would, as somebody who has been a parent would you be okay with that? Would you have been all right if they just discarded and got rid of the movie rating? I think it's the MRA. I forget exactly what it's called. I think it's the Motion Picture Association or something like that. If they just got rid of it, because essentially that's what every other form of multimedia is. Every other form of multimedia has no ratings and has no system for trying to keep it in front of eyeballs that it should only stay in front of. So if we're so okay with social media and books and all this other stuff not having a system, are you okay with movies not having a system?
It's a fair question. From a parental aspect with my kids, sure. Because whatever, I think there should be. I think the level of like
standards to one. We're applying these standards to one form of content, but then completely like our argument towards every other piece of content is like the exact opposite argument. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I remember, and I'm with you. And my first thought was like, we should still have like X-rated should be out. But again, once you get to this, like kids can see X-rated material way earlier than they can drive themselves to a movie theater and see X-rated.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
So, but I remember if you know old enough to remember the D. Snyder going to Capitol Hill and the rock and roll thing when Tipper Gore, they wanted to do the same thing with rock music, explicit lyrics. This was even before rap. This was like with heavy metal, when heavy metal was the gateway to hell. And our children were going and society was falling apart because they were listening to Twisted Sister and Quiet Riot and Black Sabbath. And you look back and it's ridiculous because I don't know of any kids, and I grew up in the hair metal era of the 80s, and I don't know any kids that went the wrong way in life because they listened to Rat and, Motley Crue. And it's just, it is what it is. So you just can't. I think this is just another aspect of helicopter parent. And I think that the people with the helicopter parents and the overprotective parents, they're not, they may stay out of trouble and they may be kept home. They're also the kids that go to college and come unhinged, but they also don't become well-adjusted members of society. That's a blanket statement, but I just think sheltering your kid isn't the best way to raise your kid. You need to, there's a level of shelter, but there's also, it's just about conversations of understanding. And, I want to know how many political families, how many families can sit there and the parents can look at the kids and be okay if the kid votes for the other political party. And that's the aspect, like, not who are you voting for, but why are you voting that way? And just as long as whichever way you're voting, you have a basis for it. And not because your buddy's voting for that way or it's cool or whatever. But do you have an intelligent stance of what do you believe and what do you support? And that's okay. And I don't know how many families can grow up, can do that, where a kid can sit at the dinner table and say, Dad, I'm voting in the other party, and Dad not lose his mind. But they should be able to. We should be able to have these discussions. So just this whole thing that like the parents are wonderful and the parents are the best way to raise lots of the bad kids because they didn't have great parenting. So lumping it all back on the parents is not the the path to righteousness.
No, which I think is part of the reason why I don't hate the rating system. Like, I don't hate the concept of it. Like, now, obviously, the problem, though, is who's making the ratings? Is it rigged? Do they have, do you have too much opinion from one side or the other? So, obviously, there's that whole debate. But I do think that's part of the reason why I didn't hate the rating concept that Anderson introduced, is because it's not just throwing it back into the lap of parents. Like it is, in a way, trying. Now, whether Anderson or the people pushing for it would actually like create an organization that is fair and just, That I don't know, but I don't know. I think I'm still on the fence after all of that.
Back to the original point. Like, if you're really, really worried about what your kid's watching when your kid is 14 years old, you can't shelter them from everything unless you're not letting them go to friend's house. Because when they go to a sleepover, what did they watch at the friend's house? And
sure.
Well, now what are you going to do? Oh, they watched something bad. Well, either your kid's going to lie to you or not tell you what they watched if you're going to get pissed off, or what are you going to do? Oh, nope, you can't go there anymore. Now you can't go there anymore. And you just can't. You can't put out all the fires. It's like chasing down a rumor and making sure, it is what it is. So all you can do, the best thing to do as a parent is to just try to teach your kids how to deal with all the stuff that he sees. And if he's watching a movie about gangsters and murder, or if he's watching movies that have highly sexual content, you just have to, explain to him what's acceptable and what's not, so he can deal with the situations, as opposed to you trying to chase down every situation and protect them. Because sooner or later, they're going to walk off to college, or they're going to walk out of the house, and then you can't protect them anymore. And if all you've done to raise them is try to shelter them, then you've done a bad job. Your job is to try to make them be well-adjusted.
I was going to say, someone much smarter than me once told me that the most popular channel at a sleepover is Taboo. The Taboo channel. Anything that's taboo. Doesn't matter what channel it's on, doesn't matter what's rated. As long as you're not supposed to be watching it or hearing it, that is the most popular channel at a sleepover.
But here's the other thing. That's not unhealthy.
No, not at all.
For a teenager,
I would argue my greatest classroom ever was actually probably sleepovers with older cousins, sleepover with friends who just had older brothers and siblings that had different experiences before they had them. Those were my greatest classrooms. I learned more in those moments than any actual classroom about how the world actually worked, for better and for worse. So I totally agree with you.
I mean, do you remember? I remember this. Do you see? You're younger. All your stuff was on your phone. I remember the first party I was ever at, and it was brothers. It was a friend's older brother, and there was a porn playing in the VCR. And I remember the title of it. I remember where I was at when I saw it. And I was just but then after you've watched, 10 or 15 minutes of it, I don't want to say, the evilness to it was just gone. And it just was what it was. And
sure.
When you start watching and they start talking about sex, and it just becomes a part of life. And there is this whole, kids can handle so much more than we give them credit for. And if we did a better job of explaining to them, it is what it is. You just, it's just how you deal with it. And it's not nearly as big of a deal as people make it out to be. It goes back to to spread this to another topic, like in Europe with drinking ages and things like that. One of the things that they've always said is, that Americans are no. And that in Europe, it's more, it's just more part of life, and it's indoctrinated younger, and people handle it better. And, whether that's true or not, listen, the kids in high school who start drinking way young don't go to college and go crazy. It's the kids in high school who were under lock and key, who were never allowed to leave the house, who go to college and go crazy.
Sure.
Because the other kids are I already went through that. I already did it. So, and I'm not saying that you should let your, you should encourage your 15 and 16-year-olds to drink. But when you see the kids who have been drinking way younger, when they go to college, they're kind of been there, done that. So,
sure.
So there is that aspect. I got a text that books are categorized and librarians are curators. Books and visual media are just handled differently. So I do think there is a trust level of librarians.
I totally agree with that. I would just argue, I just don't know if there's a great argument for why they should be different. I guess is what I'm saying. Like to me, content and multimedia is influential, right? Like it's all influential. The things you see and read and watch, and it all molds who you are. It gives you perspectives. It gives you different point of views. Like, so I'm not saying that the system is broken. I guess what I'm saying is people act like it would be absurd to apply the same system to another form of content. And I just don't think it's that absurd.
And I think in an older time, it would have made more sense. Again, now that this has shown up, it's not, as parents, we cannot control what our kids see. Even you can be that parent that like, I'm not giving my kid a cell phone until he's 16. Everyone else has one. And again, if you're ever around these kids, they walk across the room. Here, did you see this? Here, did you see this? Here. So you just can't. We can't control what they see. All we can do is try to educate them on how to absorb what they see and how they can apply it, how they cannot apply it, what's ridiculous, what's not ridiculous. Because there are lots of teenagers that don't, as we sit down and we're adults, especially people my age, they're like, oh my God, if I would have had this when I was 15, I would have watched porn all. And these kids don't. They still sit in the basement and play video games all day when they could be sitting, because they're just kind of used to it. It's their world. So they would rather sit and play 3 hours of video games than watch 3 hours of naked women on their phone, but they could. So I don't, I don't know. We teach them how to absorb and relate better than trying to protect what they see.
I agree. Let's move on to something that we're better at as Americans, and that is overreacting to football. Cowboys season pretty much over. It's pretty much done.
I've already seen it already. Eliminated from the playoffs.
Apparently, Southern Columbia is just packing up and folding. Apparently, they're done for the year. And then I've also heard Franklin might as well pack it up. A 30-point win over Ohio is not good enough. So that's overreacting to football. It might be the thing America is the best at right now.
I think last year didn't Jacksonville win week 1 and then lose 14 in a row? So
and Carolina started off the season like 3-0, and then just fell off the rails.
Yeah,
so it happens.
So locally, Southern Columbia is a great story, and it would be fascinating to know. Wasn't it their first regular season conference loss in a decade?
There's a whole bunch of
home regular season something.
There's a whole bunch of loss statistics that all range from 8 years all the way back to 17 years, depending on how you want to phrase it or word it or all of that. So pick a stat. It's almost a decade long or more, and it's absolutely mind-blowing when you start going through it.
So I can only imagine what it's like walking through the halls. This is what happens when you're a victim of your own success. I feel bad for these, 16 and 17 and 18-year-old kids who they're just supposed to win every week. And they have won every week for years and years and years. And it just can't continue like this. It's just not. And whether it was just a bad game, whether they're not as good as they were in the past, whether maybe Loyalsock's way better than we thought they were, I don't know. But it's going to be really interesting to see how, like Berwick kind of went through this back. Because Berwick of 20 years ago was what Southern Columbia is now. And everyone in the state roots against Southern Columbia every week because they've become, the big bad wolf. But now as I'm 50 and this happens and they get, you're really, really like the Loyalsock kids will always remember this. And I just feel bad for the kids walking the hall at Southern Columbia who now are they pariahs now? Like what, how, because I mean, it's like when UConn women lose and don't win a national title, like it's almost a birthright.
I think one of the most, and you'll be able to relate to this, I think one of the most underrated things that people don't understand about like not winning programs, because there's a lot of programs that are like above 500 or consistently good, because like when you're like a perennial power, I think one of the most underrated things that people miss is the regiment and the mission statement and just the understanding of like, this is the process, this is what we do. And like, obviously more times than not, it's successful for us, but just because we're not successful does not mean the regiment changes. And so I think when you're a really good baseball, basketball, football, perennial power, whatever it is, I think for a lot of what happened, like, yes, it's devastating. Yes, it sucks. But I really think for a lot of them, it's like the next morning you wake up and it's like, oh, today I'm supposed to stretch. Today I'm supposed to watch film. Today I'm supposed to talk to this recruiter. I'm supposed to. And so I think for a lot of these like really perennial powers, they're very good at that kind of like narrow focused of like the results over here. Let's move forward. Here's what we have to do so it doesn't happen again. And so for that reason, like, I'm not implying I don't understand your sentiment. Like, I'm not saying I don't necessarily have like a soft spot for those kids walking through the hall. But I think like if you asked them, I think a lot of them would just be like, we're going to be better next week. Like, we have to be better next week. We don't have a choice. And so I don't know. I don't know if it's as bad as what me or you or what other people would think it might be.
And listen, I can't relate to it. I've never been anything like it. But when you're the first team to lose in, as you said, 8 years, 10 years, 17 years, I find it impossible to believe that they just woke up and went to school and they were like, cool. I mean, I think these, and I don't know. I'm guessing someone went to school and didn't know what the reaction was going to be from the student body.
Well, not to like take away from your point. The Saturday, Sunday stuff helps.
Sure.
It's not like you played Sunday evening and now you got to walk in, you got to go to bed and go to school. I mean, they had all weekend to kind of, I don't want to say be kids, but like you had a weekend to shake it off. You're going back to school. I again, like, I think because it's so hard to put so few of us have been a part of something like that, right? Like, yes. Not very many of us can walk around and say we've been a part of a perennial power like that. But I truly believe part of the reason teams like that are successful, obviously you need talent, obviously you need all these things, but I think part of it is the regiment and part of it is the mission. And I think when you have a program like that, you are like, I find it hard to believe that at Southern Columbia, those kids don't understand what the regiment is, what they're supposed to do Saturday, what they're supposed to do Sunday, and on Monday they don't already have X, Y, and Z that they know they're supposed to accomplish. So I think those things allow you to move past it faster than what maybe you or I would expect.
Well, don't get me wrong. I don't think people have quit. I don't think, but no,
I don't think you're saying that.
They are certainly, I cannot imagine that they are walking the halls with their shoulders back and their chest puffed out like they did before.
No, sure.
And it is going to, I look at, and this is a bad example. Clemson didn't even win the ACC last year, and I think they went 10-2.
Yeah,
and it's a disastrous season at 10-2 because they've had so much success and they set the bar so high. Like if Alabama doesn't make the Final Four, it's a disastrous season. Boy, they should have lost the other day.
But isn't that another interesting part of high school football is like nothing they want to achieve has disappeared. They can win conference.
Their undefeated season has disappeared.
I get that, but you can win conference, you can win district, you can win state. And to be honest, if you do those three things 2 months from now, that game is a simple congratulations and it's in the history. And that is a way bigger deal for the other school than it ever is for Southern Columbia.
No, and I get that. What I say is unfortunate is, for all these kids with the memories and with what you get out of it. And so much of life is the challenge of building forward. Like there are teams that go 5-5 that should be every bit as proud as some of these state champions because of their talent level, because of how they had to work through and who they played. It's not just about the only teams that are proud and accomplished anything are the ones holding state championships.
No, I agree.
But it would be fascinating to see and just to talk to people in the community. If Mount Carmel beats them, if Mount Carmel wins the district title and Southern Columbia doesn't even go to states, like after this run, it is. For all these kids for this run going through, it must have been wonderful to be part of this and all this stuff. I feel really bad for the group that ends the run. And not just, hey, we got to a state final and lost, because they haven't won every state title and won all this. But you throw out one of these teams that doesn't get out of districts. I remember the last year, I know Montoursville beat them in districts in 2013 or 14. Mm-hmm. It's a lot of weight for 16 and 17 and 18-year-old kids, and it would be fascinating to see what the vibe is in the community. And this Mount Carmel game that's coming up week 6 or week 8 or whenever it is going to be monumental.
One of the best coaches that I ever had, and like I will still try to do this if the very heavily favored teams that we have had at Loyalsock basketball, I have said this to them before after we have lost. And I had a great coach.
Is that the first thing you say to them? You guys suck.
I had a great coach who once said to us after a loss, everything that you wanted is still in front of you. Everything that you've wanted is still in front of you. And so I'm not implying they didn't want an undefeated season. I'm not implying that there is not a gold standard there. I totally agree with what you're saying. I just can't imagine that, like, even despite the fact that they don't lose often, I find it hard to believe that there are not things in place there to help handle losing. I can't wrap my head around that culture isn't built to sustain these moments. I can't.
I would say this. Of all the high school programs that I know in every sport, I would say Southern Columbia is least experienced. I mean, when you say equipped to handle losing, they're the least experienced. They may be not equipped at all because they never have to do it.
But experience in losing is different than being equipped for losing.
Correct.
There's lots of people. There's people who experience losing every night they go out, and they're still not very good at handling it. So, like, experienced and equipped are two very different things.
But here's another on the flip side. People think that the coaches who win a lot are, I say, the best coaches. And I'll give you this example, because a lot of these teams that win a lot are never in close games. And there was a stretch where Gino Ariema, who is the women's coach at UConn, had lost 7 straight overtime games, which that means to me, Gino's not in a lot of close games. And when it's close down the stretch and he needs something, he not only might not be great, he might be worse than the coach on the other side, because the coach on the other side is in dogfights all the time. And even if they've lost 5 or 6 or 7 games, he's used to calling the play when you're down 2 with 17 seconds to go, when Gino's never used to being down 2 with 17 seconds to go. So I get exactly what you're saying. Sometimes the winningest coaches aren't the greatest coaches. They just win big because they have more talent than everyone else. So it's interesting.
It could be worse. You could be a Notre Dame or a Texas A&M fan. I hope all the Power 5 college football learn/relearn this lesson. Do not schedule Appalachian State. By the way, did you see the videos of Boone, North Carolina? Did you see any of this at all?
No.
Oh, Boone, North Carolina might not exist today. There were kids like surfing on the top of cars. They flooded the entire downtown. Don't get me wrong. I know this has happened at other universities, but in Boone, North Carolina, it looked like something out of a movie. It was wild.
Well, the fact that they beat Michigan however many years ago now, Didn't they almost beat Penn State?
Well, I don't know if they almost beat Penn State. Week 1, they probably should have beat North Carolina. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah.
So, they were up, I think, 2 touchdowns to North Carolina almost at halftime, maybe 3, but right before halftime. And then that game became a shootout. I think the score was in the 50s. They're a touchdown away from being 2-0 against Carolina and Texas A&M,
and ranked,
and probably being a top 15 school, like right out the get-go. The Sun Belt stuff is fascinating too. Did you read about some of that stuff?
No.
It was the first time a non-Power 5 conference had 3 schools beat as an underdog 3 Power 5 schools.
Okay.
Just the Notre Dame loss, the Texas A&M loss, and then there was one other one. I'm blanking on it now, but pretty miraculous. Did you watch the Notre Dame press conference at all?
No.
Oh, it is. You want to talk about? I think he's all the stories I've read. He's a phenomenal person, an unbelievable recruiter. He has expressed how important this job is to him. He has expressed how important he thinks it is as a black coach that he's successful at a place like Notre Dame. He stepped up to that press conference after that game, and you could see like his soul was taken. You want to talk about feeling bad for people? I was like borderline wanted to go give the guy a hug. It was rough.
Well, and Nebraska fired Scott Frost, who was like their golden child.
I don't know if you saw the numbers on that one. Scott Frost, apparently if they would have waited until October 1st, the buyout would have been cut in half.
That's what my son told me. There had to be a discussion of that.
I don't know. So apparently the buyout as of right now is $15 million. October 1st, it would have been 7.5.
There's no way. There is no way that they didn't bite the bullet to October 1st. Like we're 3 weeks away.
I don't know. I'm just telling you.
You sucked for years. Go suck for 3 more weeks.
I guess. Or they just were like, we're killing our recruiting classes. Like there's no, like our fan base is leaving us. They might have just said like, we literally can't do this any longer. I don't know. They might have looked at the collateral damage. They should have said
we can do it for 3 more weeks.
They might have looked at the collateral damage of like boosters and fan base and like recruiting and all of that and said, this is worth $7.5 million. Like it's that bad.
Or could they have done this? And they might have said to him, listen, you're out. You are not around the team anymore. We're having other people run it. We're not signing. You're getting paid, and we're not signing the paperwork until October 1st.
If I were him, there's no way I would agree to that. I get what you're saying, but on his level, like, why would you ever? That makes no sense on his side.
What's he gonna do?
He's gonna say, I'm the head coach. I'm going to coach. Unless you have probable cause for me to not be on the sideline, like that's where I'm going to be.
But what isn't that like?
And his argument would be if you want to,
that's like going to the party that you're not invited to.
No. They signed him to a contract. His argument would be, if I'm not good enough to be on your sideline, fire me, $15 million. Thank you. But otherwise, until October 1st, I will be doing what I'm supposed. I can't imagine that conversation happening. There
is no way, and I don't know how much money Nebraska has in the coffers and all. There is no way that they were 3 weeks away from saving themselves $7.5 million. Although the Cincinnati Bengals, all they had to do is hold on to the snap for 15 more seconds, and they would have got a tie. But be that as it may, I can't believe that they sat down with him. Because listen, he's in no position to be, and he loves Nebraska. Like this is his alma mater. This is his dream job. And if they walked in and said, listen, this obviously isn't working. And he can't argue it because, it's a bottom line business. And for them to say, this is what we're going to do, he might have even adjusted it and said, listen, you're right. Maybe. I'm going to deal it. Maybe he did it for 9 minutes. I don't know.
Maybe.
But if they go in and say this to him, you're going to be out on October 1st. We want to start to move on.
But then they wouldn't have announced it. Then they wouldn't have announced it.
But he has to. But he can't come. He can't come to the games. Like, they can't understand. Like, where's Scott? But for him to say no, I'm going to show up and I'm going to do my job for 3 more weeks, and then you're going to. He looks like a child.
It's so funny because I think the opposite. I think the school looks absurd. If you're the school, you brought no one forced you to hire Scott Foster. Nobody.
Frost.
Scott Frost. So he comes on the campus, he signs a contract, and now you're essentially saying, we made a bad choice. We don't want to have to wait 1 more month. So, hey, do you mind? No. If I were him, I'd be like, listen, I know you're my alma mater and everything, but contractually, this is the amount that I am owed if you get rid of me. Otherwise, I have a job to go do. I don't see how they had that conversation.
He is going to end up with another coaching job. It will be at a smaller place. He's going to end up at Florida Atlantic or Morehead State or whatever one of these places is. And he doesn't want to be that much of a malcontent that he can't, when you look at his record and you look at Nebraska, whatever the case may be, it's totally understandable that he's fired. He can either go out gracefully or he can go out like the dog that doesn't want to go for a walk and lock his legs and drag his feet.
I don't disagree.
That's not going to help him for the future.
I don't disagree. The part that doesn't make sense then is why announce it. That doesn't make any sense.
Because next Saturday when he's not on the sidelines, they can't have the media coming up and saying, where's Scott?
But then do you understand what I'm saying about in this contract, you have to wait until October 1st. So now as a school, you're holding him responsible for the school not wanting to wait a month to save $7.5 million. I just don't see what the product on the field is Scott Frost's problem. The contractual issue is not his problem. That is a Nebraska problem.
Well, correct, but these things get all renegotiated all the time. So,
but that's not his responsibility to want to renegotiate to get rid of him.
Let's take it back the other way. So they go to him and say, listen, you're out. And he can't be shocked by this. He can't be shocked.
No.
But it's still his alma mater. And he has to look at it as an athlete, as a competitor, as a head coach. He has failed. His job was to bring a winning program, and he has failed. So they sit down and say, listen, Scott, here's the issue. You're out. It's either one of two things. You're either out now or you're either out October 1st.
Yes, if I were him, I'd say October 1st.
Why? What's he have to gain by that?
Because it's $7.5 million. What do you mean, why?
No, but okay, I get. So they're going to – does he want to be the lame duck knowing that nobody wants him around?
He already is.
He knows he's out.
I understand that, but he already is the lame duck. It's just you want to be a lame duck with an extra $7.5 million. I would vote yes.
But no, this is what I'm saying. You're missing my point. I think they sat down with him and said, listen, you're not getting this extra $7.5 million. If you're going to draw a line in the sand, and I know we picked October 1st, if you're going to draw a line in the sand, then we will wait it out. And we're going to tell the kids are going to know you're fired. The coaching staff is going to know you're fired. Everyone in the locker room knows what you say is worthless because on October 1st, you're out. But if you won't work with us, that's what we're doing. Or can we do this in a dignified way and we just try to move on and heal because you haven't done the job. You have failed. We need to move on. So we're either going to do it now or October 1st. You tell us which one. It would not shock me if he's like, I will take the bonus. I will take the lesser bonus now or a negotiated bonus. But he looks, first of all, he looks awful as a head coach because he's lost. All he's done is lose.
We'll just see
if he's like, I'm going to, no.
Okay.
He looks terrible.
We'll just see what the number is. We'll find out what the number is and we'll see what happens. Because
I doubt they ever have to announce it.
If the number, at some point, someone's going to know whether it's an employee, a booster, someone's going to know the number.
Well, maybe.
Okay, so if it comes out that it was anything close to 15 million, this is 100% a Nebraska issue. Did you see the rumors about who they want?
Tom Osborne.
Urban Meyer.
Oh God, the soul has been sold.
Urban Meyer. If you're Nebraska, though, like, what are you gonna do?
What do you care? They would hire Lucifer if he could win games.
At this point, yeah, they would. Brutal. Anything? I'll give you 30 seconds for the Cowboys before we go.
We suck. People are all like, "Oh, this is what they said." I've had multiple people in this office to me say, "Your season's over. Dak's hurt." I said, "We scored 3 points with him. How much worse can our offense be without him?" Like, we have problems. We have roster problems. I think our pass defense was really good. I thought our pass defense was really good. Our run defense wasn't great. But I love the week 1 of the NFL for this reason. You've got all these teams that are like, does Cleveland really believe? Do the Giants believe? It's the first time the Giants have had a winning record at any point of the last 6 seasons, and they're 1-0.
How about the Bears, Giants, Browns? There was but Texans ended up tying with the Colts. Like, there's a handful of teams that had no business.
So then you go to the flip side. Dak's hurt, so maybe that's it. Are the Cowboys as bad? Are the Bengals as bad? Are the Patriots as bad? Are the Packers as bad? Again, we've seen these teams that Jacksonville won week 1 and then lost for a month or for a whole season. So is Minnesota really this good, or was it 1 week an anomaly because you just don't have a lot of real film to watch?
Right.
And now the teams start dissecting. Are the Dolphins this good, although they only scored 13 points on offense? Are the Patriots? There's just so much to see. Is Kyler Murray all of a sudden, does he really need to watch more film?
Dude, I'm so glad you just said that. There was a breakdown online, and they showed about half a dozen plays of Kyler Murray where, like, he didn't pick up blitzes, he didn't call audibles, he never said anything to his offensive line, and this guy is, like, laying it out. And he's like, the fact that they gave this guy the money they gave him, and he's making almost no actual pre-snap reads or adjustments, he says is wild. He's like, I think his name's Kevin Clark. He's like this big, like, NFL reporter. But basically he was like, he goes, I'm not saying it's absurd because obviously he's gifted, he's talented, but he goes, in the history of the NFL, there might be no modern day quarterback that got as much money as Kyler Murray got without actually being able to do what the modern day quarterback needs to do.
It is interesting. He's obviously got all this way on just natural ability.
Gifted. Super gifted.
And he's, unbelievably talented. Is he as smart as the typical NFL quarterback? And now that he's being called out, now that they're like, you have to learn this, can he? Or isn't he smart enough? It's going to be very, very interesting because there are certainly, just the guys that you think of. You'll see one of them tonight in Russell Wilson. You just see these guys walk out and you think they're the smartest person of the 80,000 in attendance. And but they have to be kind of naturally gifted intelligently too. And maybe you can't be an average intelligence great NFL quarterback. And maybe Kyler is really smart. He just never had to do homework before, and now all of a sudden he has to.
We'll find out. Last thing, can we please get rid of the tie? I don't understand it.
No,
it's
great.
Pointless. It makes no sense.
It's great. Love it.
What? Okay, if MLB ended after the 12th inning, would you love it?
But it's so rare.
If after the 12th inning, after 10 innings, because they only do one overtime. So if after 10 innings, they were just like, hey, it is what it is.
If after 15, sure. Very, very rarely.
NFL only does one overtime.
But it still ends the game usually. Like, make a field goal already. Not that hard.
How about just keep going until there's a winner? Like, what is like? Why stop? Just play. Like,
Because
here's
the
what I would
guys-
say: don't even don't even put a clock on the board. Like, just play.
Nah, I like the tie.
Oh my gosh, can't do it. Thank you guys for watching the Midday Show. Be sure to go to NorthcentralPa.com for all of your local news. Real quick, let's give a shout out. Can you do one for the Genetti?
Sure.
I love putting you on the spot.
Well, the Genetti with windows on 4th Street, they have the great restaurant down there, and it is obviously the local legendary institution. It is pet friendly. They just survived their biggest weeks of the year with the Little League World Series, but it is just a classic old style. It's one of a kind, and it's a legendary, and it is right down here in downtown Williamsport. So if you're coming to stay or you're coming to eat, check out the Genetti and check out Windows.
Nice job. That was good. How'd you get so good at those things?
My favorite weekend's the AFC stuff. That's awesome.
Pretty good. Thank you guys for watching Midday
The other
Show.
one, this is another good stat. Seattle hasn't played yet, and they're already in first place in their division.
It's pretty good. That one's pretty good. Both of those together are pretty fantastic.
Yep. Well, how about we were a 53-yard field goal away from having two 20-20 ties on the same day?
Yeah, that would have been wild. In baseball, it would have been the first time it's ever happened since 1902, and you would have told me about how amazing that is because it hasn't happened for 118 years.
You know, sometimes you're such a loser.
I'm Jeff Everett. He's Mark Messina. We will be back tomorrow.